All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Strategy Roundtable. Today, we have Griffin Cox from ezbot.ai, who is a specialist in A/B testing, artificial intelligence, and is working his way forward in his own startup now, having lots of success and providing a really interesting and unique value proposition to anybody with a website. So we'll get more into that, and we're going to get some wonderful knowledge from him. Today, we're going to dive into how AI can be helpful in A/B testing, and we'll also get to learn a little bit about Griffin and his journey. Griffin, thank you for being here. And before we dive in, I'd love to ask you a goofy question if you're open to it. And it's possible I've asked you this before.
Sure. Happy to be here. Yeah, shoot.
What is the best meal you've had in the past 2 weeks?
Ooh, that is a goofy question. I think it was what my girlfriend calls savory pancakes. So pancakes full of vegetables covered with a homemade blueberry compote. And it was actually really, really good and apparently pretty healthy.
Yeah, that sounds super healthy. Tell me about the vegetable medley.
Yeah, standard frozen vegetable medley. Corn, carrots, and I think
That sounds like the
green
Costco.
peas. But kind of salty, so it wasn't super sweet. And I actually surprisingly really liked it.
Was it a breakfast meal?
No, for dinner. Yeah, that was I guess the goofy part.
Very interesting. That's cool. Do you guys like to cook together, or is she the queen of the kitchen?
I'd say she's mostly the queen of the kitchen. I think I used to cook a little bit more before I met her, but we both like her cooking, and she tries to be a vegetarian. So, by her cooking, she gets to, try to convert me to being vegetarian, and, we find the balance somewhere in the middle.
What's your favorite meat?
I'm a steak guy. So I make a mean carne asada and an arrachera, which is, flank steak run through sort of a machine to pulverize it, make it full of holes and, delicious, melt in your mouth. So make a lot of tacos.
That's awesome. I love to do a chicken taco, and I recently just got the skill from enough TikTok watching to know that it's good to poke holes in it. But you said you've got a machine that does that, which is great. Your pronunciation is amazing. I know you live in Chicago now, but do you have a Latin American background or heritage, or are you just well-traveled? I know you are well-traveled.
Well, no, born and raised in Chicago, but Chicago's actually got a lot of Mexicans, Mexican Americans, and I've taken Spanish 101 3 times, once in middle school, once in high school, once in college. And then level 2 in college as well. So I've had a lot of experience on the basics and the pronunciations, but I would not call myself fluent anymore.
Okay. I like to say that I have pool bar Spanish, whatever level that is on the scale. I'm pretty good in the pool bar, especially if I've had 3 or 4 drinks. Then my Spanish is a little bit better, but
or you think it's better.
I feel like it's better, but I can't. I probably couldn't get anywhere useful, which is too bad. What about from a music perspective? Tell me about the best concert you've ever been to, or tell me about that cute pup that's running around behind you.
Well, you guys, for all the watchers out here, viewers out here, I do have two little Havanese dogs, a brother and a sister. They're about to turn 6, and Emma and Otto will definitely be running around, hopefully not barking too much. But best concert, are you familiar with Lollapalooza in Chicago?
Oh, of course. I
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to experience it as many times as I'd like, but I have been once and have seen it many times.
Yeah, so I think some of the viewers are gonna groan audibly at this, but the year I went, the two headliners for the evening I went were The Weeknd and Paul McCartney. Now, I didn't know Paul McCartney was a Beatle, so I chose The Weeknd. And The Weeknd was like 15 minutes late, and like basically half of Lollapalooza went to Paul McCartney, half went to The Weeknd. It was late. I think it was probably 10 o'clock or something. Last show of the night.
Yeah.
And with The Weeknd being late, his audience is just getting restless and angry. And why did we choose The Weeknd over Paul McCartney? I'm like, who's Paul McCartney? Everyone tells me he's a Beatle. I'm like, oh crap, I chose the wrong show. But then the best, loudest, I guess, bass I've ever heard in my entire life happened, and I felt like my entire reality twisted. And The Weeknd came on stage. He had two giant monitors essentially behind him, and they had imagery of a female Buddha up most of the time. And it
Can
really,
I interrupt and ask more about the female Buddha?
yeah, I mean, just a simple vector graphic, but you could, I guess, tell, I think, that she was more feminine than the typical
Ah.
Buddha with, different color backgrounds. That was up most of the time. And
Was she still thick like the traditional Buddha?
um, yeah, a little bit, a little bit more hourglassy, I guess. But his
That
music
makes sense.
is often like a serenade, and I just felt like he was sort of worshiping almost women throughout the show, and or the women in his life. I'm not really sure, but it was a totally different take on what I've heard previously from him, and it was a really great show.
That's great. I think that we should absolutely, especially as men, be very positive to the female gender, and I mean, we literally can't do it without them, and they can't do it without us. We have to be able to come together and love and respect all aspects of all of us and what makes us different. So I love to hear that that was a, a big element of that. And in such a space, Chicago's huge, Lollapalooza is huge. So it's a great place to spread that message of love. And that's a great concert experience. I'm glad that you shared that with us. We're going to jump into an interview, a little bit more of an interview here, but more along the lines of your entrepreneurial journey and how you've come to the point that you're at now. Many people would look at where you're at and say, that's a really amazing space to be. To do what you're doing requires a high level of knowledge in a specific domain. It requires grit and determination, self confidence, and skills in a number of different domains to be able to push a business venture forward, especially in the early stages. So people love to hear the entrepreneurial story for folks, and I would love to know, how did you get here? Tell us your story, and I'll kind of ask you questions.
Yeah, well, my
As you tell
my story is pretty boring. I was born to be an AI founder. Just kidding.
it.
Just kidding. I
Like
actually,
we all were.
yeah, I don't think anyone is born to be, say, VP of marketing at some fintech company. I think we all grow into our roles. And to be honest, I think we fake it till we make it quite a bit. I think everyone kind of does, because again, we're not born into a particular role. But I guess I'll back up. So I knew I loved computers from a young age. In 8th grade, I built my own desktop for gaming purposes. So I didn't, invent any computer components per se, but I put them together and they worked. And saved me a lot of money and allowed me to game pretty hard. I was a troll shaman, top 3, I think, on my server for World of Warcraft. So I played a lot of World of Warcraft when I was younger.
Very cool.
I'd be the 15, 16-year-old on a call with 25 people, some of whom were in their 40s and 50s, and I'd be raid leading them. So I'm very comfortable on a microphone, like I am, kind of like right now.
Yeah.
Developed, some of my early maybe leadership skills that way. Although when it came time to apply to college, my dad was like, "You're not writing an essay on World of Warcraft."
Yeah, they don't.
So I chose something else, but I do think it had a big impact.
I completely agree. I'd love to interrupt here. So you remember Clash of Clans?
The mobile game?
Yeah, exactly. So
I think I played it once or twice. Yeah.
the actual mechanism of the game is moot, but it was a similar experience for me with that game. I played Hearthstone. I never had a PC that could handle WoW as a young man, so it's not something that I got the experience of. Although in my college days, I loved Hearthstone and allowed that to eat up some serious competitive and relaxation time for myself. Another thing that did that was Clash of Clans. And as the game really came out, I mean, it literally came out. I probably started playing it maybe a month in or whatever. Everything was so new because it was the early pieces of the game, and they eventually started having wars and keeping score. And I had a similar experience that you're describing, where I had I'm an Irishman, not or by lineage. I was not born there. So I proudly made a clan, and then had 50 people in it, and was leading these things similar to what you're describing. And organizing 50 people, or organizing, your raid, this entire group, and managing communication is an extremely valuable skill, and being able to communicate it, um, especially when you're talking about job applications, or in your experience, college applications. It's hard to say this game illustrates my ability to lead, but I know from my own personal experience that what you're describing is 1,000% true. So thank you for allowing me to kind of share in that experience, and continue. Your dad was supportive, or wasn't supportive of
Well,
you putting it on there?
yeah, I was, I think a blessing kind of child to my parents in a lot of ways, partially because I was self-motivated when it came to academics. So I got straight A's in high school, just on my own. They didn't have to push me to.
Where do you feel like that came from?
That's a good question. Where I think in the moment it came from wanting, to be recognized and rewarded by those in authority. I take a slightly more cynical view on it now, and that's what I really got good at in high school was pattern matching. I
Mm,
think, and recognizing what almost what would be on a test before it was on the test, based on how often it came up from the teacher, or how much emphasis they put on it. And so I think I just got very good at playing sort of the high school game, class by class. And I think in retrospect, that was sort of my high school education. I used to say that I, was a lifelong learner, and that I loved learning in general. But I think in retrospect, I was more pattern matching than truly learning for, say, curiosity's sake.
mm,
But yeah, what got me to stop playing World of Warcraft, though, was that there's this command you can type in game. It's called /played, and it tells you how many hours, days, months you've put into the game
mm.
on your entire account. And so I typed /played. It said 2,000 hours, and I was like, wait a second, I've been playing for like 3-4 years at that point.
Mhm.
I think there are more than 2,000 hours in a year, and I just was like, that seems wrong, right? But then I realized they were only counting, time I was connected. And when you divide 2,000 by 24, you get days, and then by 30, you get months. It was, I think, like 2.5 months or something of game time of my life, of my living, awake time put into this game. And then, I think 2,000, the number is honestly hard to sort of visualize as a human. Like what does 2000 even look like, and let alone hours, right? But
Yeah.
I was like, I could have gone to a bookstore, gotten a book on how to build a boat, read the book, gone to, I don't know, a forest or something, chopped down some trees, and probably built a boat. And then I'd have a boat instead of a worthless digital character. And that honestly, like, and I did that calculation, that sort of thought process in like a minute. And then that was enough to sort of snap me out of what I now view as an addiction. So, sure, it had its benefits, but I don't let myself honestly play video games anymore because I got to be the best. I'm highly competitive, and, being the best takes a lot of time. And I think there's just far more important things for me, at least, than video games.
I think that's absolutely a great point. Where did your competitive nature come from? When did you know you wanted to be the best?
Uh, Probably still high school, just competing for grades, honestly, like I didn't play sports. So I wasn't, able to compete on a field per se. Though I did join the chess team, and in a Chicago public high school, you actually have to get a physical. They consider it a sport,
All
which is
right.
funny. It's like, what am I going to get injured, like moving my queen or something? But,
You
so I
get that
technically,
thing. You get that thing across the board, though. You may.
yeah,
You never
so
know.
I technically played a sport, but not really. I played soccer growing up, that sort of stuff. But I think it really came from being in a very competitive college prep high school, and then video games.
So you had some things that allowed you to excel as a young man. Some things that you had outlets with. Some competitiveness and independent drive to grow, which are things I like to call it intrinsic motivation. And ability to harness it for good things is something that you displayed. Um, got into a great college, and then what was your focus when you were in college? Did you know that you wanted to go into the entrepreneurial space, and what was your focus in, and what took you to ezbot.ai, or to
Yeah,
the
so it's
concept?
going to be a bit of a longer story, so feel free to sort of interrupt here. But
Thank you. I
when
love to.
I when I went to University of Chicago the first time, I was studying chemistry, and because chemistry was my favorite subject in high school,
What's your favorite thing on the periodic table?
um, that's a good. I, I don't know. I actually, yeah, I don't know.
We'll
I think
come back.
carbon molecules are pretty interesting, all of their properties.
Do
But
you like for stuff to blow up? I like for stuff to blow up.
yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of
And
fun.
I like some of the demonstrations you can do where you put like a can of soda in a vacuum and then it sort of collapses and that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
high school chemistry, even though I took AP, is completely different than college chemistry. And then college chemistry is very different from graduate level chemistry. I kind of make this joke that it's kind of like pursuing chemistry is like joining sort of like the Freemasons or the Illuminati or something, like where at each level they tell you what you learned at the previous level is, not the truth or something. And, here's the real truth. And so in chemistry, it's like the assumptions that you make in high school level chemistry, they don't hold in college level chemistry. You're learning, the weirder cases and that
The
are honestly
different depths. It's like
more
different depths of
important.
sea level.
Right. And then in grad, it would have been even more different. And so I really didn't like it at the college level. It was way more mathy and I was not as interested. And so
Mm.
I tried computer science, which, given where I am today in AI and having been a software engineer for 4 years, you think I would have done well in computer science or enjoyed it. But computer science is computer science at University of Chicago. So it's all theory, a lot of math, and very hard. The languages that you have to learn are languages that aren't really used in practical applications anymore. I think they had one class on making a website or an app at the time I was there, just nothing practical, very theoretical. So if I wanted to invent a new kind of machine learning, probably would have been a great place, a great major for me. But at the time, I wanted to make apps that businesses, could use. My entrepreneurial spirit was sort of flexing. And I think to answer your question, my entrepreneurial spirit comes from my dad. who ran a painting company in Chicago and on the North Shore of Chicago for 20, 25 years. I worked with him throughout high school, so I got to see it sort of heads on, from customer service to pricing, negotiations, doing high quality work, and really satisfying clients.
Interior or exterior?
Interior. He did faux decorating, faux painting, and so he would do finishes that you'd see mostly in hotel lobbies. Really fancy. Looks like wallpaper, has a texture.
Yeah.
Usually involves 3 or 4 coats of different colors and materials. Like, we're not talking base coats like the blue behind me.
Yeah.
People would come in, repair the walls, paint them a solid color, and then he would come in and then do, honestly, finishes he invented, and he named them after clients he had. So
Creativity.
I was really the only one that was doing it for probably the first 10 years. And that's how he made, I think, a lot of his wealth. And, it's the wealth that catapulted us into, I'd say, the upper middle class. So I had a comfortable life growing up. I had 2 parents that loved me, which honestly, I think is the biggest advantage one can have.
Let me interrupt on that. This has nothing to do with the well, the only thing it has to do with the entrepreneurial journey is that uh, if you want to be an entrepreneur in the States and have a great set of people to choose from a labor force perspective, then this might be a problem. Um, but statistics are starting to show that dual parent households in schools are drastically down. Um, 25 to 50 years ago, it was like 5 of 25 kids were in just the home of the mother. And now it's like 20 of 25 kids live with just their mother. So that's an interesting statistic, and only relates to you pointing out that you had the benefit of both. But I figured I'd take a minute to throw that out there because we should solve that. Maybe not you and me, but somebody we.
Yeah, I am. I recognize I'm quite privileged in that regard. I think, as hard as I've worked to get to where I am today, and we're getting there, I promise. It definitely, I started from a leading position, given that I had, 2 parents that loved me, and no significant, I'd say, issues really, until my mom got cancer in high school and
That's a
unfortunately passed
serious
away
thing.
before college. So.
That's a
No,
seriously atypical situation, and I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I've, I think, largely moved on, but, I having a great head start for 16, 17 years, still set me up, I think, for success. And, I think should be very proud of where I am today. So I've worked through it.
I always love to point back to intrinsic motivation with people, and this you can have all of the quote unquote head start, and I don't necessarily, like you said, we're all dealt different hands, and it's all to measure it's not intrinsically motivated to measure somebody else's start. You know what I mean? Because you got to go from where you are. That's all you got. And that's true for everybody, unfortunate or fortunate as it is. I mean, that is the way life works. Um, but the intrinsic motivation piece, you could have a hypothetical head start or a hypothetical worse start, but owning your outcome and what you control and your effort level and your input, at least in my opinion and in my time managing people and teams, that's been the thing that differentiated whether somebody would have success or whether they wouldn't. Not, well, where are they now? It's always, well, what are they willing to own about their journey within themselves? And the people that own more of it, which you are somebody that holds that very well, go further. At least statistically speaking, I wouldn't hold that as a forever true for everything. So data science, or you did computer science for a little
Yeah.
bit. You ended up as a software engineer.
Yeah. I got the lowest grades in my entire academic career.
How did that feel for you as a competitor and as somebody who'd had success in school consistently?
Devastating. I mean, I got a C plus, I think, in my first computer science course, and I mean, again, coming from straight A's, that was a
Mhm.
shocker. That course, I mean,
Fear.
blood, sweat, tears over that course, and I think largely it's hard at U Chicago, sure, but I also didn't have any formal computer science like classes or anything. I didn't know any programming languages. I knew nothing just other than I liked computers, and thought I knew what I wanted to do. And that is turns out not really enough. But I suffered through that, tried it again, suffered through that, and then changed majors. So now we're on major number 3. And not everyone who goes to college has the opportunity to have 4 majors, essentially, like I did. But if you're going to a liberal arts college, then they sort of allow you to jump around a little bit more, at least until you must graduate. And so I jumped to econ, economics being,
It's a safe spot to sit.
yeah,
It's some
well,
good stuff to learn.
yeah, they say it's the default major at University of Chicago. I think they're right. I joke that if you throw a rock on campus with your eyes closed, you'll hit an econ major. A lot of econ majors who, never really wanted to be econ majors, I think. Plenty that do, and went to U Chicago, I think, for the right reasons. But in my case, I was sort of doing it as a bit of a fallback, and because I liked an econ course I took in high school.
What's more interesting to you, micro or macro?
Definitely micro, and I think you'll see why in maybe my next major. So
Keep
then,
going.
yeah, so I made it somewhat far in economy. I took 3-4 classes. Thought I was going to graduate with it eventually, and then I had a macro course that was taught by a graduate student that was clearly, I guess, misinformed about the level of difficulty it should have been. And at first I thought it was me. I'm like, never taken a macro class. Maybe it's just me, right? But the class started full at 60 people. You get 3 weeks at the start of a quarter to drop the class without a penalty. It doesn't show up on your transcript. And so by the third week, it's like, I think all but 16 had dropped that class, and that is rare.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
And so those people either delayed their major, to take it either. I don't think there was it offered next quarter, so they really waited to the next year to get a different instructor, or they changed majors or what have you. So I mean, it was rough, and the final signal, if you will, is that there were so many complaints about this particular graduate student that they ended up curbing the class to a B plus, which is unheard of at U Chicago. U Chicago takes grades very seriously. A's are rare. It's not Harvard, goes the joke. And so to curve to a B plus is also crazy. And so, yeah, I don't think it was me, but either way, it was enough to kick me out of the major. And I decided psychology would be much more interesting. I'd actually enjoy the homework, the readings, and that sort of stuff. And I ended up being right. So I took, enough CS or psychology classes to graduate. And so I am technically a psych major. And that's really where I think my journey to ezbot begins.
I love I love what I'm hearing for 2 reasons. The first is authentic journey. Your experiences and you listening to, well, this obviously isn't right. I'm going to flow this way, and being able to flow with what life is delivering to you. I've been the type of person who will force plans that maybe don't need to be forced, and that has a different toll and is a different opportunity cost. So that authentic journey, I think, is really awesome. And then I think, from my perspective, I like to say a really strong entrepreneur will come in with maybe 3 really well defined knowledge domains, verticals. A normal human being, and I say normal human being from a statistical standpoint, everybody is a beautiful, wonderful, unique flower, and I do believe that. But statistically speaking, from a knowledge perspective, generally people have one thing that they're really intelligent and well informed on, right? Somebody that moves into high level leadership or entrepreneurship will need to have 2 things that they're able, at least, to kind of lean on in strength domains. Either their specific expertise and the ability to understand people or other things related to that. And then anything more than that, you're getting into what's a really, really strong entrepreneur. And the reason that makes a really strong entrepreneur is because in the startup world and in early stages of business and small business, the business owner or the startup team or the set of founders and co-founders are covering with their expanded skills and knowledge a more limited on a more limited budget the full function of what a business needs to not only be successful or be short-term successful but grow over time. So it doesn't surprise me at all that with your authentic journey giving you a multitude of experiences in a short amount of time, you were able to apply that well in the entrepreneurial world. After college, where did you go? How did that
Yeah,
pan
so
out?
I never let go of my desire to work in software, but because the CS major didn't work out for me, I knew I had to basically make it happen myself. So I went because my mom passed away. Going to University of Chicago was a huge financial burden, and I used a variety of scholarships to make it possible. And that is to say, I just didn't have a lot of money left over at that point, to teach myself or enroll in other classes, that sort of stuff. And so I found the cheapest boot camp I could find, and that one is called Thinkful. Still exists today. I think it's a little bit more pricey than when I joined it, but they can offer much cheaper sort of boot camps on a variety of subjects now, mostly programming languages and software development, though. Because they've developed a proprietary learning curriculum that you take on your own pace, and then you have access to essentially a mentor once or twice a week via Zoom or whatever. So you're not going into a physical classroom, and so they save all of that money, I think. And so that's why I think the whole thing cost me $3,000 over 2 years, and that was really just 2 summers that I did it. And the way that I made it work, I don't know if you can still do this today, but I took two or three courses, and each one said it would take like 3 months or something to do. But I did them all in, I think a total of a month or something, rather than 6 months total or something like that. And so I just sped through them because you paid per month. So I just made the most out of the resources by just going super duper hard. And that's really where I learned to code. But I didn't know any engineers. I didn't know anyone that was really like better than me at building applications that people want to use in particular. Though I knew plenty of brilliant computer scientists, I would say. And so I, basically got into app development that way. My first entrepreneurial idea in this vein was what is now Facebook Marketplace, actually. So about a month before they launched Facebook Marketplace, swear I had no idea they were going to launch Facebook Marketplace. I was a user of Craigslist at the time, and Craigslist was just full of spam and super dangerous at that point, and just honestly shit. I can't believe that website still exists the way it does. But
When I was in college, we used to go pick up stuff off the free, off the free section, like pick up a toilet and put it in your buddy's college dorm room or whatever, just stuff like that. Anyway,
there you go. Yeah, and so I was like, I think the whole thing would be a lot better if people had to log in with their Facebooks, and so that way you could check
social
out
credibility.
you could check out their profile before you meet them, and there'd be some layer of accountability if they stood you up or robbed you or what had you. And so I basically had a prototype of that ready to go, where you could post items and review your items and all of that. And then Facebook Marketplace launched, and I was like, okay, Facebook's
Fold this up.
Yeah, put it away, that sort of thing.
You're gonna have Griffin's list.
I think I called it garage sale,
Nice.
something like that. But didn't make it out of the garage, I guess. So then I basically took the internship I had in college, which was for basically the admissions office, building their websites. and turned it into a full-time position after I graduated. So I continued building University of Chicago websites as what I would call web developer. So I took frameworks that were out there already. They use Drupal, for example. It's an open source it's like WordPress. And, I would basically configure them and then help them write content and that sort of stuff. And, I wasn't an engineer yet because I wasn't inventing or creating those systems. I was really just operating within them. Did that for a year. And as all of my jobs that I've ever gotten have come from warm intros, a friend of mine from college, a member of my fraternity years ahead of me, was working at this company in Chicago called Enova. They do loans essentially. And he was like, it's loans, but it's a great place to start a career. They have really well-resourced engineering, or you can learn a lot really fast and then, go somewhere else. And he ended up being, really right. So I applied, I, got in, and I was there for 4 years. And that's where it starts to link back to my college experience. I mentioned I studied psychology at UChicago. I really studied experimental design, and honestly coming up with the wildest experiments that you can sort of think of, like whether say what, sorry?
How fun.
Yeah. But and a lot of the papers I read were by my professors, and I honestly got my major by criticizing them. I tend to take the critical view on anything, but for them in particular, it was always about sample size, because to get another participant in a drug study, could cost thousands of dollars. And so they're hard to find. And so it's like, you might only have 36 people in that study that, sure, it has significant results or something, but, it's like, really, this is so few people, and they're all weird, which is an acronym that basically means like, people in college that were easy samples, And so I made my major, I guess, criticizing and that sort of stuff. But as a software engineer, I moved away from experimentation. I actually became an engineer, learned to build systems and learned about enterprise software code and code quality and all the processes that go into that. And I really just loved it. I had a great manager that always helps. I always thought I would do something myself. But at that time I was really comfortable in corporate, making more money than I'd made in my entire life, more than I ever thought I'd make. And, it was fantastic. But I started to get, an itch, and I wanted to show that this new technology called Vue, it's for front ends. It's a JavaScript framework like React. A lot of people have heard of that one. I wanted to prove to my team that it would be better than traditional, we use Ruby on Rails, so more of a server-side rendered application framework. And to do that, I needed a tool, a way to basically test them both at 50-50 without impacting performance, because I wanted to show that it had better performance, and I didn't want to affect performance just by the tool I was using to measure performance. And then I wanted to launch that and show them with data that it was because the page would load faster, people would apply for more loans, and they would, make more money, that sort of thing. Yeah. I ended up being right. It took a while because it was our first time as a team really doing that sort of A/B testing. And in the process, I took it upon myself, and this is maybe an point of entrepreneurship, but I took it upon myself to investigate SaaS, or software as a service, tools that would enable that sort of experimentation or A/B testing. I'll use those terms more or less interchangeably, but or digital experimentation too. But what I loved is they had tens of thousands of people on their website, and so compare that to like the survey or the experiment that I read about in college with 100. Having 10,000 participants means that you can really detect a much more minute effect, and you can do so much faster. And so that was really compelling to me as someone that had studied more traditional experimentation. And then I discovered Optimizely. Optimizely is, they call themselves the world's largest digital laboratory. They've helped customers run more than 1 million of these sorts of website A/B tests. Is this button color better than this other button color for conversions? Or, is this image, this messaging, this entire layout, what's better for conversions? And yeah, go on.
Give the audience a quick look behind the curtain on how much that shit actually matters. Because at the surface level, if you don't have a marketing background, if you're not really hyper, and you have a psychology background as well, right, which is closely linked to marketing and sales, and your communication skills lend to good for both of those things. But if you don't have knowledge within those domains, you might not understand why having the right color schemes, having the right presentation, um, will yield more. And you talked for a moment about efficiency of loading, in microseconds, increasing yield. And I guess I've kind of just talked through it myself, but touch a little bit on that for me, if you wouldn't mind, and then keep going.
Yeah. So going back to like a groundbreaking study, I think from around 2008, because you can actually find studies on, a lot of big companies will publish their A/B testing sort of findings, and maybe that's a great way to start. There's also a website run by a friend of mine, Deborah O'Malley, called Guess the Test. And Guess the Test, basically, they show you like what's going to be better, A versus B versus C versus D, and then you guess as a human. And most of the time, even as an expert, I'm wrong. And I think that sort of is my entry to answering your question. Like, we have, as humans, and let's say if we're talking about someone's web store or website, we have strong opinions and we think that we're right. We look for confirmatory evidence most of the time, evidence that we're right, not that we're wrong. So you sort of have to think in an opposite way when you're practicing science or digital experimentation, where you're trying to almost prove yourself wrong, and chip away at the possibilities to uncover what is hopefully truth. What is the best combination?
What is surely truth? What, from as many possible angles as possible, remains truth?
What is almost certainly, but at least highly likely truth, And so in science, you don't actually prove truths, you disprove falsehoods. And what you are left with, hopefully, is truth. But it's kind of like a sculptor like chipping away at a giant block of marble, trying to get to a Michelangelo statue. What you're chipping away is falsehood, so wrong stuff that's wrong, and what you hope you're left with is the truth, although it's not guaranteed, not strictly speaking.
It's a reflection of life too. You should probably be trying to do that with yourself. Anyway,
yes,
it's not you.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many. They're called cognitive biases. There are at least a dozen that are really well researched and proven out. And there are so many. Like one of the most common ones is like a lot of people think they always choose the slowest line in a grocery store. Right? They're like, I am the worst at that, right? And that's an example of confirmation bias, whereby it's more likely you'll remember the moments you chose the wrong line than the moments you chose the right line, and you'll have a skewed memory, essentially, and think that you choose worse than average, when in fact you're probably just wrong an average amount of the time. So like that's one example. But yeah. So when it comes to digital experimentation, though, the biggest companies started it, and so we're talking Amazon, Google size, and so I'll walk you through a couple of big experiments that I think will start to shed a light on this, and then I'll bring it back to smaller websites and entrepreneurs. So Amazon did a now famous study dealing with page load speed, and this is where my hypothesis at my fintech company came from. They found that 100 milliseconds of added page load time cost them in the tens of millions of dollars per day at the time, something like that. And that's because they have a lot of traffic and they make a lot of money. And so, even an effect of 0.1%, is a lot of money for them, right? But 100 milliseconds, you couldn't really notice as a human. And so that's pretty wild that it had an effect that big. Now, if you translate that to today's dollars, it's even bigger, and they've grown too. So it's like a ginormous number, right? And so we now know that page load time affects, basically conversion rate, the rate at which someone performs an action on a website or an app, for example, that you want them to, whether it's a checkout or an add to cart or complete this form or whatever. So that's one example that, smaller websites, entrepreneurs can use even though they probably couldn't have detected that small of an effect on their own websites, just given traffic and statistics and that sort of stuff. But the second experiment, which is hopefully going to illustrate this too, is now called the 50 Shades of Blue experiment. And this one was from Google. They didn't actually test 50. I think it was in the 40s, like 44, 46 different shades of blue for the links in, I believe it was Gmail. But essentially they wanted people to click on those links because Google would make money when people did, right? And so is this color blue or that color blue better is a fair question. And they uncovered that there was one in particular. It's actually the one that's in the product now, if I'm not mistaken. It's a slightly purpley shade of blue. That is the best at getting people to click it. And that one makes them, I forget the number, but it's in the tens or hundreds of millions per year alone. And so, that's, I would say, maximum scale sort of experimentation where you can, because you have millions per day or per month, like visitors on your website, you can detect extremely small effects. And then those effects have really big outcomes often. But bringing it back down to like the average person's level, there's still plenty to do that is worthwhile and that you can do with way less traffic. And so what I'm about to start to talk about would traditionally require at least 250,000 visitors per month. And that's if you do a power analysis. A power analysis is math you can do to tell you what sample size you would probably need in order to get a powered experiment, a sufficiently powered experiment that could detect the size of changes you'd want to detect on a website. Like a conversion rate lift of 3 to 5% is something that would, meaningfully affect one's bottom line. And so, you need about 250,000 visitors per month. But that is just with traditional experimentation tools. And in the age of AI, that requirement is going away. And so now, like with my own product, with ezbot, our minimum is 10,000 visitors per month. So we're, 1/25th of what used to be the minimum. And so, there's there are many more entrepreneurs, websites, apps, with much less traffic, traffic between 10 and 250,000 or more that can now optimize their websites and apps for more conversions, usually more revenue. Automatically in the case of my product. But yeah, I'll pause there. That was a bit of a ramble.
No, that was good.
What do you think?
That was good. I'm happy with it because I love it because it says directly what the value of doing A/B testing is, and then it touches directly on, well, now AI can make it a whole heck of a lot easier. The conversation in my eyes is, well, how? And we can get into that a little bit because I think that the how you guys go about doing it in a way that gives actionable data, it does two things. One, the way that you're doing it is good because your background is in good testing. So you talking about how it's done is a really good thing to go through here because you truly are an expert as it is related to A/B testing. The fact that you've made a company out of that makes no surprise to me, or I'm sure the audience. So run us through that. And I love the juxtaposition of what it could be done at a large scale in the micro. And, you talked about your preferred interest in micro as it relates to economics. So this makes, again, more sense. This is, you like to get things right, get the test right, have the data right. I love that. And where it can create value at a high level and where it can create value for an entrepreneur. Let's start with at the small scale. If somebody was utilizing your software or whatever else to be doing A/B testing, even if it's just their own A/B testing, right? Without AI. Talk a little bit about what types of things your partners look at commonly that generate outcome quickly for the business, and then also spend a little bit of time talking about your methodology and how it reflects in ezbot.
Yeah. So
And feel free to we can absolutely dive into your supplementary content.
Sure. Well, I'll start with just traditional A/B testing. So when it's now becoming a commodity. At the end of the day, you essentially need a way to bucket a visitor, meaning like determine which treatment or control group they're in. So that's usually done.
Demographics.
Yeah, it's like, usually a random chance based on an audience that they're a part of. So, people in Chicago, I want to try one of 3 different things to see which one gets them to click the most, right? Um, and then from there, I think I'll introduce the concept of screen real estate, where the higher up a website or app's view or main page, homepage, the more valuable the real estate. If you look at a heat map, so this would be using sort of a supplementary tool, but there's a free one called Clarity out there. Even I think Google Analytics can do some of this too on the free side. But if you look at how far people scroll down your website or your app, read the rest of your content, less and less. And it's kind of no surprise, right? Like, of course, 100% are going to start at the top, but then, people will lose interest for a variety of reasons and then drop or just bounce. And so that's when, so that's why it's important to experiment on the best real estate possible. Now, this is also the highest risk stuff, right? So if you get this wrong, you could hurt your conversion rate. But generally, you help it by working on. Let me just finish this thought. Like on like the topmost element of a website is usually a bar with some text and maybe a link. Usually, it's we call it the butter bar. Sometimes it's called a brag bar, but it's frequent on a lot of different websites. And if you don't have one, that's a great place to start. Try adding one as an experiment. But, it's a great place to just, if you're an e-commerce store, link to bestsellers. You're going to get a shocking number of people who wouldn't have purchased something unless that was there and they clicked it and it got them to bestsellers faster. It's surprising. Button color for the add to cart or the checkout is a classic. And it is a classic because it's so effective. It's shockingly effective. We're talking like 20% plus conversion rates getting the color and font size of your add to cart button right for your audience. Like it's these little things have massive impact. And so those are 2 experiments you could run on, any at least e-commerce website. But generally, the stuff that more people sees, the more of the visitors see, the better for experimentation, usually on a homepage or on the most important pages. There are some nuance there, but you raised your hand.
Thanks, man. I wanted to draw a little bit of attention to the idea of the screen real estate, in that there's parts of your website that are more valuable for important content to be. And I know it's simply said, restated, but we are not able ourselves as humans to run all the tests necessary with all of the different people to put everything exactly where it needs to be optimally the first time. It's just not possible. And recognizing, well, there's real estate on my website that I want content to be because of X, Y, and Z outcome. And then having the conceptual knowledge or the ability to utilize a tool or a service to be able to say, hey, look, we're having a significant drop off right here at this line. Oh, it's because there's a typo and it's a profanity. And like being able to identify those types of statistical anomalies because of conscious testing on what's happening, it adds a tremendous element of agency in your business. And you being a tool and utilizing AI as a supplementary aspect of your tool to be able to do this fast and at massive scale, so that you don't have to be an Amazon or a Google to run the tests necessary to be competitive in that space. I mean, that's the value, right?
Yeah, that's the value prop I offer. We'd call it the mid-market, the lower end of the market that, just don't have the internal resources to run a fully fledged A/B testing program. Like, though I've made it sound maybe a little bit easy, it gets hard real fast. And so like if you're running 2 experiments on your homepage, they can affect one another. There's a whole series of things that you can do or should do to tease them apart that we don't have time to get into, and so to run, like the best companies using traditional A/B testing tools are running hundreds of experiments simultaneously. That's something I don't think a small business owner can do well, unless maybe their website is the number one most important thing about their entire business. And so that's why there's a whole industry of conversion rate optimization firms. We're targeting them actually for this product potentially, but these people have the expertise. They've been doing it for a while. You basically hire them as consultants for your website, and then they use their expertise to improve your conversion rates. And that's the kind of the state of the market now. But as you kind of mentioned, like AI is very much changing that. And so if you would actually show this slide, this I think explains what ezbot does in a nutshell better than I think anyone can.
Am I on the right slide?
Yes,
And
yeah,
then I'm
thank
going to
you.
get our
And
cute little
so
faces up. Look at us.
nice. So our ezbot, the product, you put it onto the website, can go on any website. It's a JavaScript snippet. For those of you that are more technical, just drop it on there. You tell us what you'd like to test, or we can tell you what you should be testing. And then all of those different combinations. So if you have 10 things, each have 10 different things you want to test, 10 to the 10 number of combinations, just a ton, right? More than you could possibly test by hand. Our product constantly tries different combinations, but does so intelligently. It's like a guess and checker on steroids. It's constantly trying different parts of your website, serving the best possible user experience according to our model to any kind of user that visits, and all in the name of maximizing conversion. So visitors performing the actions you want them to perform. Usually, again, getting you some revenue. And so our product has automated that process. You no longer need to worry about statistics or analysis, or there are no humans involved in the decision-making process. You just tell us more or less what we can test, and we tell you what the best possible user experiences are and serve them automatically. And that's where AI is changing the game. And we do so with, as I mentioned earlier, 1/25th the traffic requirement that traditional A/B testing requires, and that's due to our proprietary deep reinforcement learning.
Who do you guys like to work with the most, and what do you want to see be the next big steps for ezbot?
Yeah, we've had I think the most interest from two groups. The first being e-commerce stores, and it's kind of no surprise of all the different websites. Um, E-commerce stores generally are monitoring their conversion rates at least a little bit, using in free tools like Google Analytics. Um, they want to make more money from their website. Sometimes their website is the only way they sell products, and so it matters. And so our product just naturally resonates with them. The other folks that we're working with now are conversion rate optimization agencies. Those folks that I kind of mentioned earlier that used to use traditional tools and now are looking for an edge, looking to handle more clients with fewer internal resources, for example, and they can use our product to do that.
What about organizations that do a ton of website stuff? So I can imagine, we're in this AI world right now, and we're moving forward. And there are folks that have been doing websites for a very long time and maybe feel threatened by new things that are out there. What do you say to those folks, and how do you work with or not work with organizations like that?
Yeah, I've had the most fun and the most success working with what I would call generally early adopters, people who are willing to try something that, maybe is it's the first generation of it, still got its bumps, doesn't do everything you want it to do, maybe breaks down every now and then, although I'm not talking about our product at this point, but more like other technologies. And those folks I find are willing to give this kind of thing a shot. And if it works, then, they are willing to adopt. So we've had a lot of pilots with that sort of success in mind. Um, there will always be people that fight, I think, technological change. But if we zoom out to AI a bit more generally, and though I do deep reinforcement learning, not large language models like ChatGPT, if you include ChatGPT in the title of AI, like under the category of AI, it's becoming a competitive advantage for anyone to learn to use these tools, right? And so, I'll use ChatGPT to get my creative juices flowing when I'm writing a blog post. I don't use it to write the post because I think my writing is better, but I certainly have a conversation with GPT before I get to writing. And that's really helpful. So learning how AI of any flavor can be helpful, I think is a competitive advantage for basically any career, particularly those that are digital.
So you would be thrilled if somebody who has a large book of web development clients reached out to you and say, "Hey, look, I want to give these guys the best,"
Sure.
so that would be exciting to you. Think
Yeah,
of
I'd
those as
say,
partners.
you probably have all these clients already, and you're not charging them for an AI service offering. Why don't you make some more money, charge them some more, deliver significantly better outcomes, and save effort while you're doing it. Embed ezbot in your websites that you build for your clients. Talk to me. That's what I'd say.
Good, good. So we're at an hour here. We're at our time. Um, we have some good content here, and I want to give you the opportunity to go through any slides that are important or valuable to share. I think, or not, if necessary.
I
If
may,
there's none of
I'll take a look at my deck, see if there's anything extra interesting. Otherwise, one thing that your listeners, viewers might appreciate is, especially if they're considering going into startups themselves, there are some books that I usually recommend to people going into startups that, all else equal, we could end on.
do your
See
thing,
here.
man.
Yeah, let's just jump into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for those of you that are, thinking, I want to be my own boss. I want to, reap what I sow. I want to, hold on to the money that I make. I'm done with corporate, for example. Comes with great risk, and you really got to think about it. But there are some books that can really help. One of them, this is for those of you interested in venture capital backed startups. So ones that need a lot of money from external investors to be successful, like mine, potentially. And that one is called Founder versus Investor. It's co-written by a founder of many startups and an investor of many startups. And they basically tease apart in conversation in a book the two different opposing viewpoints. And it's really interesting because, you always are going to have a love-hate relationship kind of with your investors. They do have some power and some rights that can get in the way of what you want to do with your business. But at the same time, you need their money. So, it's a relationship to manage as a founder. And that is a great book to do it. Another one that I read recently is called Super Communicators. It's over here on my shelf. Charles Duhigg is the author there. This one is a bit more general, so not just people starting who want to start startups, but people who just want to be better communicators. Like you mentioned, I'm a good communicator. I don't know. My heart was still racing when I started this conversation. I still, have approach anxiety when I go up to talk to somebody new.
You fooled all of us, man.
I'm good at talking about this stuff, I think, but Super Communicators has been really helpful for me to learn really how to listen. And I think the most insightful thing from that book that I learned is the different types of conversations and being able to rapidly identify the type of conversation your interlocutor, your conversation partner wants to have is really great. So, it's even helped me in my private life where, if my partner wants to have a conversation that's more about ideation, about dreaming, then my typical type of conversation is about problem solving. And so, the two don't mix well. And so being able to identify the conversation she wants to have off the bat has been very helpful. So that's another book rec. And I think the last one I'll mention here for those of you that are going to have to sell your product or services or whatever. I'm guessing there are a lot of you guys out there. That would be The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. And, it really positions sales for those of you that are like, I could never cold call a ton of people or talk to a bunch of new people and convince them like I'm just going to annoy them, right? A good sale is a win-win. They're, if you're convincing someone to buy it and it's a lose for them and a win for you, you're going to have a
You're
hard
just an
time.
ass.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really about disqualifying leads because it's not good for them or it's not good for you. And then what's left is people, probably 10% of the people you were going for, that would, that your product or service would be a win-win for. And in theory, it should be an easier conversation, right? Because, you're like, hey, I can help you with that, and they're like, I care about that and I want the help, and it's a win-win. It's like it's a much more easier conversation. And so when you view the lens of sales through disqualification, I think it gets, a lot easier. So three books I'd recommend.
Thank you for sharing those with us, Griffin. I love to talk about communication and sales, so I'll say this one little thing: you don't waste all that time trying to sell people that aren't going to be sold to. You just get to spend the time. So it's an efficiency thing there, if anything else.
Yeah,
Griffin,
and a bit of a numbers game.
And a bit of a numbers game. That's well, because time is, Griffin, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your solution with us. I hope that you'll come back on sometime and we can get into some more of your expertise around AI, or just follow up with what you're doing someday in the future. But thank you for coming on. Thanks to everybody for watching. Next week, we're going to be having a conversation about the myths of AI. This conversation is about what is commonly expressed in mainstream media, but is not the explicit truth. And Griffin, you'll appreciate this because you like the detail and getting things exactly right. Talking about what an AI hallucination actually is and getting into the depth of what we should be calling it, and agency around what individuals and entrepreneurs can do with artificial intelligence, and in it not being a threat, but an opportunity. So that's the conversation next week with my friend John Robertson. Griffin, thank you again for coming on. Happy Friday, everybody, and have a great weekend. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks.